Welcome to Faith, Love, and Therapy, a podcast to encourage and inspire. I'm your host, Jamie Johnson, a clinical social worker working in the field of mental health for the last 10 years. I believe this podcast is God-led and God-inspired, and I thank you as we peel back the layers of mental health from a faith perspective. Thank you for joining me. So grateful to have you. If you want to connect with me on faithlovetherapy@gmail.com. You can send me an email. You can also connect on social media at Faith, Love, and Therapy Podcast. That's on Instagram. And then on Facebook, Faith, Love, Therapy Podcast as well. So look forward to connecting with you and learning more and discussing more on those platforms. So episode 36. I hope you're caught up on the last couple of episodes. They were about attachment and relationships and kind of digging into that and how we connect with one another and kind of the difficulties that we can have in relationships due to our attachment style. So if you have not listened to those, please do so that you can kind of gain insight on that particular area in your life. This episode, we are looking at mental health, but if you are dealing with or have a loved one who is struggling with mental health. So episode 36 is really some tips on how to assist or be of support to a loved one who is struggling with mental health. So 2020 statistics from the National Institute of Mental Health show that 1 in 5 adults have a mental health diagnosis. We all know someone with a mental health diagnosis, and this could be depression, anxiety, it could be OCD, it could be schizophrenia, it could be something that deals with their health that has led to some form of psychosis. We all know someone who has experienced some level of mental illness at some point in our life. And so it is not something that we can really get away from. Not that we're trying to, but it is just something we really have to address because it is so prevalent. There are some that would be under a category of AMI, so it's any mental health illness. And that could be a mental, behavioral, or emotional disorder, and it can vary in impact. So it could be mild, it could be more moderate impairment, and it could be a severe impairment. And then you have serious mental illness, which is defined by a mental, behavioral, or emotional disorder that results in serious functional impairment. So there's a substantial interference with or limits on major life activities. This is where we see individuals who require being in an institution. They also may require ongoing support in order to remain in the community. They may require housing that is supportive living arrangements. So this is more of your severe mental illness. They have difficulty even going to work. They have difficulty taking care of their regular responsibilities, getting groceries in the house. So please know that there are different levels of mental illness. So mental illness is very prevalent, and with the pandemic that we are coming out of, yay, we are coming out of this pandemic, there has been an increase in mental illness and mental health diagnoses throughout this pandemic, specifically in the age group of 18 to 25. We've seen a substantial increase there, also in school-age children. So you may be living with, supporting a child, a parent, a spouse, some loved one with a mental health challenge or mental health diagnosis. And I just want to provide a few tips that I believe would be helpful. First one, I would say, is do not assume. It is best to ask questions about what your loved one is experiencing. Use open-ended questions. That means don't ask a question with an answer attached to it. Ask exploratory questions. Explore their concerns without judgment. Often when it is our loved one, we get into a role of like wanting to fix it, wanting to solve it for them. And so we get in a mode where we just jump in and start trying to have solutions or tell them what they should be doing. And we don't really have a complete understanding of what they're experiencing. And so being able to just listen, ask questions, and get a good view of what your loved one is experiencing is important. Be opening to listen without providing unsolicited advice. That's important. Listen without, again, trying to come up with a solution or solve it or fix it for them. Do not offer unsolicited advice. And that could be difficult depending on your relationships. I think of specifically when children are talking to their parents about mental illness. Oftentimes a parent, because that is their typical part of their role, is to help their child. They're going to think of and try to tell them what they should do. And first, just take time to get an idea of what exactly is going on. So don't make assumptions that you know what they need, you know what's happening, you know why this is happening. Allow them to give you insight into what's going on with them. The second tip I would say is encourage professional support. Please, please, please encourage professional support. One of the things I hear clients say the most is that their family will quickly say, oh, you're not depressed, or, you don't need therapy, you don't need medication, you don't need that. You just need to go ahead and rest, or if you exercise more, or if you stop doing this or stop doing that, or you pray. That is big in our community. If you just pray more, read your word, talk to God about it. None of those answers are wrong, but also with them, there may be something deeper that's going on that a professional may help them to tease out. And so please encourage professional help, because professionals will talk about self-care items or issues. They'll talk about things that will help to benefit holistically, not just the therapy itself, or medication if that's the route they choose to go. Allow a professional to assess and discuss treatment options for your loved one. This could require that you set aside your opinion and prioritize their needs over your opinion. So if your opinion is that people don't need medication, that's not something that you need to offer up, but allow a trained professional to talk to them about their options, which doesn't always have to be medication, but your loved one should know that that's available to them if they so choose. The third thing I would say is learn as much as you can about their diagnosis. So once they have been to see a professional and probably after a couple of sessions, and the therapist or the psychiatrist or the psychologist, whoever they're seeing, has said, this is what I see happening, and I feel like you have blah, 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 blah. So if it's anxiety, or if I feel like you have depression, or if I feel like, there's some psychosis happening. Learn as much as you can about the specific diagnosis, and so that you can have an idea about what the symptoms actually look like. Sometimes we start to assume when we hear the word depression, we have a particular picture in our mind of what depression is. But depression looks different in everybody. So there could be someone who is still going to work, still tending to their hygiene, but when they go home, they're barely eating. They immediately get into bed and they sleep the night away, and then they start the routine over again. And their thought process is very, depressive. Their motivation is very low. But on the outside, they look like they're taking care of everything they need to take care of. There are others who are unable to leave the bed. There are some who seem incredibly happy, and you would never know that they're struggling because they only struggle in isolation. So being able to learn about the diagnosis and how it could look is important. When you start to make assumptions about what you think it is and you verbalize that, oh, that's not depression, you probably just stressed. That could lead to withdrawal of your loved one. They can start to withdraw from you. They could become resentful. They can lose trust in you. And they can also start to minimize their symptoms because they don't want to make you uncomfortable. And, we see that all the time. We start talking about those people that I didn't even know they were depressed. They're always happy. They're always excited. They always have so much energy. And then we find that they attempted suicide, or worse than that, they were successful in their suicide attempt and they lost their life to suicide. Some of those moments are because individuals did not have the space to process without judgment. They didn't have the space to talk about what they were dealing with without someone telling them, oh, no, that's not true, or I don't think that's it, or no, you just need to pray, or no, you just need to, get out of the house more. And so their feelings and what they're dealing with has been minimized. And so that individual decides, well, you show them through your behavior, that this is not a safe space to talk about what I'm going through. So learn as much as you can. Don't make assumptions about what it should look like, that particular diagnosis. Have some really good conversations with your loved one, but also if they allow you to learn more about their treatment process, they may allow you to be a part of a therapy session so that you can get insight as well. The next thing I would say is set boundaries if needed. Depending on the severity, or where needed, not if needed. Boundaries are always necessary. Depending on the severity of the issue or the diagnosis, a family member could have severe reactions. They could have, they could have verbal aggression or experience verbal aggression, manipulative behavior, lying. There could also be physical aggression. And these are things that you don't have to tolerate, because they have a diagnosis. And I think some of us, we tend to allow for excuses or give too much space to certain behavior that you don't have to allow. And so you need to be able to set boundaries and explore, what physical boundaries there are. Are they allowed to be with you alone? Is this something that they can be left alone in the house? Can they be left alone with other children? When they are aggressive or when they are feeling anxious or manic or depressed, what are certain things that that this is beyond your limitation? Setting limits does not have to be done in a rude way. Setting limits could be very loving, to be able to say, hey, when you are experiencing a manic episode, you don't have as much consideration for my feelings. And I know that I know that this is part of your diagnosis. So during that time, I'm not going to be able to take as many calls from you. But you can text me if it's an emergency. I'll definitely check in. You can set boundaries that are appropriate for your own well-being. So be willing to set those boundaries for your own mental health. Know that there are some mental health diagnoses that are you as a parent or as a spouse, you're not equipped to deal with. And, I think about the viral video of that, of a woman's home. We saw the viral video. Her home had been wrecked, and it was done by her 15-year-old son, I believe. And she was upset, that the video went viral, but you could see the level of damage to her home. Like everything was destroyed. And so that is an individual who would not be safe in the home, especially with young children, without some type of support. He needs additional services. He needs somewhere to work through the issues so that everyone is safe. So that's an example of knowing what limits need to be set in order for everyone to be safe. The next thing I would say is watch what you say. Really watch what you say. Many things are undiagnosed due to fear, lack of knowledge, and shame. That is, a lot of shame that's rooted in cultural issues and those that are rooted in religious views or religious expectations. We may see family members exhibiting behaviors that warrant professional help. And however, they're convinced that they're fine. They want to ignore those symptoms. Some of these symptoms could be due to trauma. Some can be due to chemical imbalance, some environment, some, genetic, but individuals may experience a lot of shame because of that, and they don't want to acknowledge what's happening with them. What you say is incredibly important. It can contribute to the level of shame, or it can help to free them from the bondage of shame. Shame says that I am a bad person at my core. That's what shame is. It's different from I feel, guilty, or I feel like I did something wrong. Shame is literally at its core and hard to move beyond. So when we respond to people's feelings and their issues in a way that makes them feel even more ashamed, like being dismissive, even trying to over spiritualize symptoms, being critical, it can cause many people to diminish or minimize their own symptoms to be able to so that they're not acknowledging or not feeling shame from having these types of diagnoses. But also what we see because of that is they're not seeking treatment, and there is a greater mental decline. And sometimes that leads to, addiction. There's a lot of co-occurring diagnoses, which means there's a substance issue and there's a mental health diagnoses. So watch what you say, and when you hear someone have a diagnosis, or when someone is sharing about their mental health or sharing about symptoms, we like to use things like, "Oh, you crazy?" Let's watch how we respond to the people that we love, right? And the last one is more for you, I guess I would say. Self-care and caregiver support. You cannot do all things. That is what God does. Yes, we know the scripture says we can do all things through Christ, who strengthens us, but understand what he means by that, and understand that we're not doing this alone. So when I say you can't do everything, you can't do it all by yourself. Seek therapy for yourself when you are dealing, when you have a loved one who has a severe mental illness or any diagnosis that is can be heartbreaking. Find support groups in your area. Look for other opportunities to care for yourself, because that is necessary. Self-care is necessary. Seeing your loved one struggle is taxing. It's also heartbreaking. And, you may have experienced some traumatic moments as a result of their mental health. That's something to acknowledge as well. Out of their own mental health, their response, their behavior could have been something that traumatized you or led to an experience that is hard to move beyond. If you're a caregiver of, let's say, a parent with mental health issues, find a caregiver group that's specifically for, adults of parents that have a diagnosis, or parents that are declining, or even things like dementia could also be in this category. Listen and offer to attend sessions if they're willing, so that you can learn more about what's going on with them and their emotional state. As a parent of a young child, please be a part of your child's treatment process. This is critical, especially when they are definitely under the age of, I'd say, like 16. Be actively involved in their treatment process, and be receptive to changing some things that may be recommended by their treatment provider. There may be some things where they say, we want you to, really work on how you engage with your child, some things around the house. Be receptive to that. Sometimes that can be seen as criticism, where really it is a view of how you can better help your child that's dealing with mental health. So these are just a few things that I feel would assist you if you are supporting someone, if you love someone, if your child, your spouse, your parent, close relative that you care for has a mental health diagnosis. These are some things I would urge you to think about and to consider. If you have additional questions on this topic, you can email me at faithlovetherapy@gmail.com. I thank you for joining me on another episode of Faith Love Therapy Podcast. I'm healing and taking some folks with me. I'll see you next time.